thinking I wanted to be an AmeriCorps. I wanted to be an archaeologist, digging things up, preserving history, and understanding human beings through their material remains. But as I kept on doing my AmeriCorps years, 3 years, I found out that the people behind the heritage are the people that I want to do work with, the people that created the archaeological stuff that you find in the ground. And I know that might be a little confusing, but I find people more interesting than I find the material. So helping out and volunteering and doing community service and work to preserve this heritage and bring it to the forefront of the public consciousness and to creating interconnected webs of people and places and groups and organizations is kind of what I want to do, because it's fun and you get to talk with people and you hear some really interesting stories and you have to bite your lip sometimes. But so that's sort of my journey to create the Vista positions. And then my two service sites, one was in Chicago, Illinois. And the interesting thing about that site was I am a white middle class heterosexual male in Chicago at the time, but I was living in a predominantly African American neighborhood, and it was a culture shock. I was raised very progressively in my family in upstate New York, but going from middle of nowhere, upstate New York, to Chicago was kind of like, huh, I can't see any green space anywhere around here, and that is a person being mugged over there. And not to say Chicago's not beautiful and has plenty of green spaces, but there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done in Chicago with community. And I was very thankful that I lived in a safer space. And the South Side is actually relatively safe if you don't, go walking in the middle of the night and you have 120 something bucks on you. Not a personal experience, heard it from a friend. But you going into it as an AmeriCorps member and continuing on with your service, you find that the people that you interact with and the communities that you interact with have an impact on how you see the world around you. And now, as a person in Vermont, or service in Vermont, it's the complete opposite of Chicago. I go on walks sometimes that are like 7 hours, or not 7 hours, 3 hours, but 8 miles, and I don't see anybody else. That doesn't happen in Chicago. So I guess there's differences that you take into account when you create your VISTA program and you continue on service from year to year. So that's a lot of what I've done. From Chicago, cool, represent. And I would suggest that if people really enjoy doing AmeriCorps and really do enjoy serving communities, disserviced communities, impoverished communities, rural communities, urban communities, communities that haven't been created yet, I would suggest it. Make sure you know what you're doing first, because you can get yourself in over your head if you don't know exactly what you're doing. I wanted to keep it short and sweet and to the point, and I guess that's it. If people want to ask me some questions or chip in, I'm not going to get into talking about my time as an urban explorer in Chicago, because that could last another hour. But please ask questions. I am here to, I guess, help you out. And if you guys want to, don't Facebook stalk me, because I will talk your ear off. But if you want to know more, you now have my email address, and you can send me some information, and I can tell you how I developed some of these programs and who I talked to.
Thanks, Cooper. That's amazing. Feel free to unmute yourselves. Don't feel like you have to ask questions on the chat. Since there's not that many of you on here for this session, we would love to have you guys connect directly.
I might have just missed when you said this, but what did you get your master's in at Vermont?
And who is this? I'd like to know who I'm talking to.
Yeah, this is Paul.
Hey, Paul.
So,
So I got my master's I'm getting my master's. I'm actually going to be completing my master's thesis in December. I'm getting my master's in industrial archaeology from Michigan Technological University, and they have a program called the OSM Vista Industrial Archaeology Master's Program, where you, for 1 or 2 years of your time as a graduate student, you are an AmeriCorps member, and I believe they have it that it takes off your tuition and a little bit extra if you go in with the idea of doing an AmeriCorps year sometime in the future. It is a great program, and the people there are really friendly. It's just that it is very, very isolated up there. And unless you know that going in, you're going to be surprised.
cool. Thank you.
Welcome. And Noel said, "What neighborhood did you work in Chicago?" Well, in Chicago, yeah. So I worked in quite a few. I lived in Bridgeport near the White Sox game. Did not enjoy the drive into Bridgeport on the White Sox nights because that was hectic. But I worked with the Pullman community in the south side of Chicago. I worked with some communities in Indiana, northwestern Indiana. We were doing something called we're trying to create a national heritage area. I think there is probably one person or two people who are probably in this training who are part of a national heritage area or working with one. The Schuylkill Greenway, I think, is one. Let's see what else. But yeah, I also worked with some communities in where was it? The Field Museum. So that's the surrounding areas in there. There was also a museum in Bridgeport that I worked with, and all of these are trying. When I worked with these museums, I did a lot of going to the community members and talking with them and seeing what they want to do, and we collaborated, created this big old exhibit that's currently traveling from location to location to location. Oh, I also worked with Gary. Gary was fun. It's kind of sketchy there, but there's some really cool places there. Okay, and did you enjoy moving sites, or did you just want to stick around for another year at a particular site? That is a funny one, because every single site that I wanted to, except for the one in Syracuse, not because of Syracuse being a bad place, but because I've always lived in New York. I always lived in New York. Didn't really want to stay in New York. And it was a good program, but I decided that I wanted to do grad school even more. But when I went to Chicago, I really wanted to continue my service there, and I had it all planned out. And then they told me that the funding had dried up. Either it was the funding, or they just decided that they needed to go a different direction, which is the case when you're trying to do museum work, because museum work's not always the most profitable of things, because it's a very slow burn when it comes to raising economical awareness, because you have to think of who's going to the museum, what are you representing, what programs are you offering, and a lot of these museums are smaller museums. Field Museum was the difference, because that was a giant museum, very cliquey, but giant museum. Great place to go though. The one here in Vermont, going in, I was like, cool, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do another year. But then I realized I eventually need to make money from a real job, and I have student debts, and Vermont doesn't have a lot of museums that are focused in my my career path. So it's kind of like, we'll see what happens, really, but I don't know what's gonna happen. But yeah, if I could stick around for another site here, I would. But moving around has always been very hectic. I've lived in some cramped spaces, but I guess that kind of answers your question there, Maya, Paul, that person. Anything else from people? If we were in person, we'd all be sitting around a what is it? A campfire right now, because that's usually what happens at these trainings. Okay, no. So I'm looking to do something similar to your route in terms of completing my master's while working as a Vista. I'm really enjoying Vista so far, but I also really want to get my master's in geography or urban planning. I've actually met some people in the past who've done urban planning in Chicago. They are nice people, and Chicago's a big place, so urban planning would be great there. So you can actually look into, there's multiple master's programs where they will they will cover your tuition or they'll cover a portion of it. I would suggest using that because it will hook you up and save you a lot of money. Um, but when you're doing looking into a master's program, uh, you also want to make sure that you know what you want to do when you go in there. There are sometimes some when I went into my master's program, I didn't necessarily know exactly what kind of industrial archaeology I wanted to do, and there are kinds. Um, but if I had gone in with a little bit more knowledge of what I had wanted to do, maybe a few years of Vista under my belt before then, I probably would have uh, done some things differently. But I'm not saying I don't enjoy where I am right now because I'm helping people out, working with communities I've known all my life. Oh, and yeah. Um, so from Clark, a UMKC student, I could guess that acronym or that name thingy, but anyways. How do you go about finding housing, relocating, and then connecting with all these different communities after moving from New York? Trial and error. Um, so when I found these housing in Chicago, I got scammed a few times. There was one lady who kept on trying to get me to get a her apartment in a rather nice place, but then found out the person was. Long story short, they were a fake, and it was really, really funny why it was a fake. And I when you're trying to find housing for something, when you're creating something, you're looking into the future and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do, you have to plan ahead a lot, which means going to Craigslist, going to roommates apps, and all that good different stuff because you need to make sure that you have housing directly when you get there because it's been very nail biting. Not hearing back from somebody and then like 10 days before you're supposed to move, they go like, oh yeah, sure, yeah, you can live here. Um, and when you're connecting with these different communities after I went from New York, you have to throw yourself into the fray. When I was in Chicago, and I bring that up many times, I didn't know anybody there. I'd never been that far out west, and sometimes I was scared and I cried because I did not know anything and I was not. It was a big culture shock. Um, I made some friends that turned out to be people I didn't want to actually be friends with. That's another story. Um, so it really is. I guess a lot of it's by luck, but I know it's not by luck. It's having a personality, I guess, where you can adapt to different situations, as well as just knowing that you need to get out there, even if you don't want to. and making these connections, but also being friendly, and just rolling with the flow. Like when somebody starts college, you don't necessarily know who your friends are going to be, but you're going to try your darndest to make as many friends as you possibly can. So yeah, I guess that's my 2 cents on that. And don't get chased by homeless people in Chicago. It's not always the fun thing to do.
Hey, I'm going to jump in, Cooper. I want to go back to Noel's question about getting a master's while serving as a Vista, because that's something that I did as well. I got my Master of Public Administration from West Virginia University while I was serving as a Vista there. So one suggestion that I have is if you can find an advisor or a professor in the department of the program that you're trying to apply to, or you're looking to that you're looking at. One way that I was able to kind of manage that time management aspect is my VAD and my class deliverables were 1-for-1. So one of my objectives on the VAD was the creation of a stakeholder inventory and power analysis tool, which kind of took into account who's who and what's what in the community, right? And that was to be used by community members, but it was also part of my master's program to create that. So I just kind of want to reiterate, if you can find someone in that department and kind of talk through like what your curriculum would look like and how you can find parity between that and your Vista service, that might be one way to kind of figure that out and, go the distance there.
Yeah, and to jump off of what JM said, when I was starting to finally crystallize what I was going to do for my master's thesis, because currently I'm trying to. So the idea of my master's is to understand and see the differences and similarities in industrial heritage volunteerism in urban and rural communities in the United States. And when I was planning everything out, I was like, okay, well, what can I do now that I'll be able to cross pollinate between these two different programs and my master's, and doing research on volunteerism because hey, I've been a volunteer for almost 3 years of my life now, service years. So I have a lot of information that I can provide to my master's, but also bring to the table as an AmeriCorps member.
I just wanted to say one point, if y'all can hear me.
Yep.
Thanks for both your advice on that. This is Noelle, by the way. Sorry, I didn't say anything. But I appreciate both of your advice on the completing the master's while doing a Vista program. I think like I have a little bit of like insight of it. I just wanted to know like the fundamentals of it in your everyday. So maybe we can connect after the Fireside chat, maybe LinkedIn or something. But I actually played a role in creating my first Vista placement earlier this year with the Conservancy for Cuyahoga Valley National Park, just because of my like proximity to the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Director. A year prior, when she asked my scholar group at Kent State about how to create a good diversity team within the national park space, because we're a group of scholars for people of color who want to continue with their education, and so she thought we would be a good like group to sort of shape a new DEI program in the environmental field. Yeah, but thanks for that. I really do appreciate it, and I would like to connect with you, you and JM later.
Sure thing. I'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely. I can just shoot you an email.
Yeah, that could work too.
Yeah, cool.
Hey, JM, it looks like somebody's asking you a question there.
Gotcha, Julia. curious about other service opportunities Stewards offers, especially CVA. Experience surveyed is similar to Vista. You know, I'll be totally honest with you. I haven't had a lot of interaction with the CVA program. Trish?
Yeah, so that's really a great question, Julia. We have a CVA program with Vista, and we have CVA with just as an AmeriCorps state and national program as well. So you can be a Vista or you can be a direct service serving with state and national. If you're interested in the CVA Vista program, you can connect with me for information about that. Right now, we have all of the sites that we are having for CVA are full, but they will be up and running again about a year from now. They started in February, so we're looking at another run next year, in the beginning of next year, and for Vista CVA program. But if you're looking into the direct service with CVA program, I can connect you with the folks that run that program. They run out of the Stewards West office on the West Coast in Colorado, but I can put you in touch with Katie or Emma out there so that you can connect with them and see what other opportunities are available. I'm not sure how often they have their CVA running, but it's my understanding that they run around the same time. I'm not sure if Jeremy is in this Fireside chat. He is one of the CVA Vistas serving with us. He could talk to you guys a little bit more. But yeah, we can definitely get you more information about CVA program, Vista, and State National. You're very welcome. Cool. Do we have any more questions for Cooper?
Trish, I'd like to add something.
Yeah.
This is Josh Jones, development director. Cooper mentioned his graduate program through Michigan Tech, and that's one of the two partnerships we have at Stewards with graduate programs around the country. And I may not get all the details exactly right, but I know Western Colorado more than I know Michigan Tech. But they provide basically a whole year's worth of master's credits for your year of service at AmeriCorps through a VISTA program. And not only that, they match your education award as well at Western Colorado. I'm not sure about Michigan Tech, but they are really two great programs to look into if you are thinking about graduate school to really get more bang for your buck. Like I said, because you can use your 1 year as your VISTA project as your what they call a service project to the graduate program, and then the other half of the year it means you cut down your graduate program in half, and they match your education award. So it's really a good deal either way. I just wanted to mention that, and you can research that on our website and other places too.
I have a question for Cooper. Again, this is Noelle.
Shoot.
So it's more related to your master's program and how you were able to shape that, like your research. So you were doing AmeriCorps Vista while you're completing your master's. Did you say that your research goes hand in hand with your Vista term? And just because I just have questions because, I want to get mine in geography, and focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion is a big part of that. And I already know what I want my research to be, and like my search criteria and sort of the people that I want to research, other African Americans in urban cities like Chicago. So how did you if your Vista terms have been in all these other places, but your base was in Michigan, you said, how did you navigate all those different locations and your research and all of that?
So I got again, I got kind of lucky. The people that I work with, that my colleagues back at Michigan Technological University, um, I was the first person in the industrial archaeology, the OSM Vista industrial archaeology program, to actually decide that they want to do a Vista year um, during, like, directly in the middle of uh, my graduate education. So we kind of worked it out, being that, okay, well, you're going to go to this place. We don't know exactly what your research is going to be, but you're going to come back with your research topic and some data that you can do. So I kind of went in thinking about and researching one thing, but then I came out doing something completely different. Um, and I kind of wish that and sometimes I kind of wish that I continued doing my research on that one topic. It was because Chicago is a very industrially focused area, and my background is industrial archaeology and archaeology anthropology. I was going to study the urban abandonment and dereliction and structures that had no longer become quote unquote productive. But then I realized that, hey, this isn't actually going to be something that's going to give me a job. So I switched and started doing research on volunteers in museums and heritage and museum presentation. So it's when I guess when I decided that I was going to do that, and I was planning out how I was going to intermingle all of my different research interests and my service here, uh, it was uh, it was planned, but it was also not, and I just had to go with the flow and see where things take me. As in a lot of research, when people do qualitative research as an anthropologist, they go in with a research question. They go in looking to find something else. But when they're there, they find out things that will help them to guide their research into something that can be productive, useful, and new and informative to the wider public. So I guess I would say that if and when you do your projects and you create your work, you think of it as a means to an end, and trying to figure out exactly what part of the different things that you're doing make the most sense to you and you see as being the most helpful to you, the community around you, and that you find interesting. Because if you can find something that's interesting and you get to do work on it, then by all means do that. Don't know if that was super helpful, but there you go.
Do we have more questions for Cooper? No more. Cool. Cooper, is there anything else you want these folks to know before we end for the day?
Let's see. I'm very approachable. If I ever meet any of you, not sure if I will. I'm very approachable. I will talk for hours. But I have to say thank you for listening to me rant and rave about this, because I can get pretty in depth with trying to figure out what's going on. And if you feel like you would like to ask me more questions, I'm sure that you can find my email, and you can probably find me on LinkedIn, and just thank you to AmeriCorps again for another year of amazing service. And I think that everybody who's participating in AmeriCorps is going to remember their years, and they're going to look back on it both fondly and as a learning experience.
Great. Thanks so much, Cooper. Thanks everybody for joining in. I'm going to, yeah, so there you go. You can reach out to Cooper if you want to ask him a few more questions. Cooper has just recently started his second year, so he is here for the long haul, a little bit longer. So I am going to throw the open space QR code just one more time before we take off. If you guys can remember to sign up for open space, this is a time that we set aside to get you guys talking about whatever you want to talk about. We are hoping to plan 3 sessions for you for Thursday. So this survey is going to stay open until tomorrow evening, beginning of the evening. And yeah, we hope to see you for open space. I can, yeah, I can let you guys go. Thanks everybody for participating on Fireside Chat. Thanks Cooper so much for coming and talk to these guys. And we'll be back tomorrow with a new training day.
Have a nice day, everybody.
Thanks.